Hello, everyone. Welcome or welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. You know, how many of us move forward on entrepreneurial journeys with new jobs or even with like creative projects, only to find that you're stuck and wondering what to do next, or you're kind of lost, or you get ahead of yourself? You know, it could be that what you need is clarity. And my guest today is an expert in exactly that. She's a strategist, clarity and communications coach. She's the author of several books, and we'll probably get to some of them during the conversation. She's a TEDx organizer and speaker. She is the Chief Clarity Officer of Masters in Clarity. Dolores Hirschmann, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan, for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this because we met a couple months ago, although we've been in email communication probably for a little longer than that. And it turns out we have some really great mutual connections like Deirdre Breckenridge, who I know that you've done a lot of work with. Believe you me that I'm going to tag her on this podcast. She's so delightful. And I know you helped her a lot. Maybe we can touch on some of what you've done with her and with some of your other clients. But you're doing some great work in helping entrepreneurs and helping companies and helping your clients kind of achieve some kind of clarity so they can move their ideas from the idea stage through to fruition. And you've even created a model around the idea model. So I want to cover this kind of stuff. I want to talk about all that. But, you know, you have this fascinating story from South America to here and all over the place. So Dolores, why don't I just ask you what's the journey? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. So first of all, yes, I have an accent. I'm originally from Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I've been here in the US for over 20 years, just by serendipity. My husband, as I always say, my husband was a tourist in Buenos Aires. You're not supposed to marry the tourist, but I did. We went out for dinner, and 3 months later, we were engaged. 7 months later, we were married, and I've been in the US and the East Coast ever since. We have 4 wonderful, all taller than me children. But from the very beginning, I have been in pursuit of ideas that can change the world since very young. I've always had a creative side of me. I thought I was meant to be an actress, and I wanted to be an actress when I finished high school. And my dad said, "Great, go to business school, and then we can talk about it." So painfully, I went through business school. Painfully, I mean, because I am a creative. I love working. And so, yes, I can study, and I did it well, but it wasn't my happy place. But what it did, sometimes they say, follow your passion at 18. I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's get some practical skill sets at 18 and then follow your passion later on. Because what business school did for me is it gave me a framework or a set of rules or some insight on how creative ideas or creativity can be funneled into action or impact or something that can change the world, right? And so from that, I am very grateful that I had to be forced to go to business school and that I endured it. But even back then, Dan, I think I shared this with you. I graduated, and I'm not afraid to say I'm 48, and I graduated in 1996. And when I graduated in 1996, think about it, before Amazon, before social media existed, my graduating paper, we called it a thesis, but it wasn't a full thesis, was marketing on the internet, relationship marketing. So I've been in the field of technology and communications forever. And while I'm not a software person per se, I've been in software, product development of software's roles for some time, and then marketing and communications. So at some point, through my career, and my first big job here was in literally directing the first online learning platform for kids built in the US in 1998. My boss, quote unquote, was Jeff Reichs, because Microsoft was our main sponsor. So we reported to the Microsoft team, and we deployed the first online learning program, pretty much, I think, in the world, teaching high school kids how to start and run a business through an online process.
Now, this is 1998, right? I mean, and from there until through the...
There were no computers.
Well, I mean, we all, well, I know me, because we're we are of an age, right? I mean, I'm maybe a year older than you, but we've come up at the same time. And, I remember those Windows 98 PCs, you know, I remember how revolutionary
and
amazing
the dial-up, the dial-up modems.
Dial-up, right? I mean, trying to get any kind of activity done with people, through the internet at that time. I was in Japan, and I had I was one of those, I guess, in the early phases of online recruitment at the time, right? So I was working for a recruitment company, and I had a dedicated connection to the internet. This is 99, maybe 98, 99. And I remember how slow it was just to get, anything really done. But at the time we thought it was super fast, right? At the time, it's
it was a miracle.
This is amazing. I have a database, and at the click of a button, I can find out, 35 or 40 different fields of information about a candidate that I'm considering to put forward for a client for a job. And I would just click the button. I'd wait a couple seconds, and then, I'd have.
We were a lot more patient back then.
Well, yeah, and then if I was, once it got really advanced, I could actually download the resume. If I had I could click the button, go make a cup of coffee.
In a good day without a rain.
Right? Then go make a cup of coffee, come back, and boom, I have the resume up. I can't even imagine what it would have been like to do online learning at the time. I mean, even LinkedIn didn't even start until 4 or 5 years later.
There was no social media.
No, social media, that's right. Social media just really started to pick up 2001 and 2, yeah.
Amazon was 1997.
Wow. So we're talking about essentially the dark ages of the bright future. But in many ways, I think things were a lot better back then. I don't know.
Well, so there are a couple of things. I remember when I was doing my research for my thesis that the internet was an open platform. That's how we called it. And you literally could email anybody, ask for information, ask for their research, ask for their white papers. And again, it was a modem issue. Wait a couple of hours and you'll get it, but they will send it right away. Like the first online grocery store in the world was in California at the time, 1996. And I did they were my case study of application of applying internet. But here's one thing that I came out of that conversation. And it's interesting that it's 2021 and we're talking about this because I wrote that paper in 96 and then I forgot about it. There was a lot of things that happened in the middle. And then I kind of found, cleaning my office, I found my printed version in the bottom of a drawer, and I took it out, and I actually have it handy now because this was about 3 or 4 years ago, because I realized that the work I did in 1996 was exactly the work I'm doing today. Totally different in the how, but the same why. And the conclusion of that paper was that the internet was going to allow us to have a more close connection experience. What I said, and again, this was before Amazon, right? This before, I couldn't name what was going to come. I couldn't say big data. I couldn't say AI. I couldn't say any of those because they were not invented, but I could envision what was possible. And so what I concluded was that the internet was going to allow us to replicate the experience, let's say, of the 1800s or early 1900s, where you would go to a store, which they know you by first name, and they would say, Dan, do you want another pound of chicken like you did last week? Or how was the recipe that you cooked last week, right? And, again, we're the same age. In 1996, unless you lived in a very, very small community, the chances that you would go into a supermarket and someone would remember what you bought the week before and mention it was impossible. There was no connection between brands and markets. There was at most a telephone call if you picked up the phone, or a direct piece of mail that is a one-side conversation. And so for me, it was like, what is possible when there is a bridge between brands and consumers? What is possible when a company can use technology for customizing and creating a high-touch experience? And so that's why I believe that if we are focusing in the right elements, if we are reminded that there's a human on each side of the equation, then we can move from and let's call it digital marketing, from automated robot-driven marketing to automated robot-driven enabled high-touch marketing. It's a difference between the technology being the ultimate bridge versus the technology being the actual, the kind of the beam of the bridge.
It's a great analogy. And I like the way that you lay it out, the fact that it's from automated to automated enabled. And that there, I think, is actually, we're in this sort of, I don't know, in a period right now where it's all mixed up, and where I think there are a lot of folks out there who are struggling, taking advantage of these tools, or struggling with, or using them incorrectly, or just trying them out in the marketplace, and they get to a certain point, they get a certain amount of success, and they think that proves the validity of the approach. But in fact, what it's doing is actually souring or poisoning a couple of wells out there. Like, for example, as we were talking earlier, I mean, when we talk about automation, I think we're all victimized fairly regularly, especially those of us who are in marketing and communications and have been around for a while on any of these platforms. I can't hide myself. I mean, it's impossible. I've been around, exactly like you said, since 96 or 97. If I opened up my first, social media account in 2000 or 2001, then forget it. I got 20 years of paper trails and electronic trails and digital trails. Forget it. My footprints and my thumbprint is everywhere. But anyway, because of the accumulated detritus of our digital lives, it's easy to find me. And any number of keywords, any number of reasons to find me, people do. And I get mails and direct mails and emails, and on LinkedIn it'll be in mails, et cetera, all the time, and just like you do. And I've found that, especially during the pandemic, and I've talked about this before, but I found that during the pandemic that's accelerated quite a bit. Like, there's probably because of a lot of folks being out of work and starting things out on their own, or figuring that, hey, I can't count on anybody else to employ me, so I'm going to just make it on my own, and I'm going to just put my stake in the ground, and I have these great tools available to me, so I'm going to do what this book tells me to do. I'm just going to start emailing people, or I'm going to start, I'm going to open up a LinkedIn Sales Navigator account. I'm going to program, or I'm going to set my parameters. I'm going to do these searches. I'm going to come up with 5,000 leads, and then I'm going to use some very, boilerplate or cut and paste. Or I'm like just hit everybody with the same message, and maybe I'll be able to afford a little automation in that. And that there is where it all falls apart, right? Where you're using a platform that is supposed to be for human connections, and you're pretending to be human when you reach out to them, when in fact you're enabled by the technology to reach out to everybody, but you're not embracing the humanity at the end of the cycle. And, look, I'm guilty of some of this myself. I will admit that there were periods of time where I'm like, oh, this is a great tool, I'm going to try to, and you reach out to whatever, a couple hundred people, and in very short order, I realized this is not me. But, it happens all the time. So there's this issue where people are, unfortunately, I don't want to say suckered, but they're convinced that there are these great answers out there for their business or for their life, because the perpetrators of such nonsense have access to them through all these digital tools, and that weren't available back then, and the humanity's out.
And there's a saying that, if you find a great tool, just wait a minute and a marketer will come and mess it up, right?
That's right.
We have Clubhouse right now. It's like, oh my God, Clubhouse is like insane. I put my toe in there for a minute, and I took it out quickly because it would suck my whole life. But some people have multiple phones going on at the same time. So you actually have people who are in 4 rooms at the same time. And you're like, how can you do that?
There are people taking advantage. So, I mean, just like anything else, there are people who have, within a week of being on Clubhouse, they pushed all the right buttons and got whatever, a couple hundred followers, and suddenly they're a Clubhouse expert. And then you just start a room that says $1 million secrets to success on Clubhouse. And, look, call it serendipity, call it adventure, call it, hey, it's a lucky, lucky kind of seeing the opportunity, whatever. But there's no substance behind that, But Clubhouse is an interesting animal. I was just talking to somebody who's very active, and there are communities of people who really organize amongst themselves how they're going to approach and almost attack a Clubhouse room, as moderators. Like they have a moderation strategy for the room. They have an offline, like an offline meaning off-platform chat happening. They're instructing each other to go on. So that way they can keep the room going for like basically eternity. Yeah. And, they'll never log off. They'll never log off the app because, like you said, they have multiple phones, and they'll keep rotating in and out and they just know each other. It's just like, it's not a racket necessarily because sometimes they do provide value, but it's like you said, that it's only a matter of time for the marketers coming in.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah. And it's actually, I don't mind cool strategies. I love creative new strategies. It's really when you forget that the person listening is a person.
Yeah.
That's really what when it all falls apart. If you keep remembering that, you're good.
Well, and that all comes down to, like how long you want that relationship to last. And is the important thing the transaction or is it the relationship? And sure, in the early times or sometimes in your career, or some people might think it's the transaction. They're being held to a certain standard or they need to make enough money to do something, or maybe they have some kind of idea, but and you've even laid it out very nicely in your book, trust is really the currency. Building relationships.
Trust is the currency. Yeah. Yeah. Trust is the currency. That's why, when in the idea method, what we do is we break down. The idea method, which you mentioned earlier, Dan, it really is the backbone of my business and mostly the backbone of me. And it came about years ago. So, as I was telling you the story from Argentina, I moved here. I worked for that nonprofit. Then I had my third child and I decided I was going to be a full-time mom. That lasted about 9 months. And I didn't get rid of my children, but I needed to start a company. And so basically I had 4 companies, different years. Every 5 years I would start a company, and I had 4 children. Every 2 years I would have a child. So, you can do the math there. I was either pregnant, nursing, or in startup mode. Repeat. Well,
you might have crossed the border into being a heroine at this point, or a hero at this point, because that is just that's a lot to hold on to shoulder. No wonder you wanted to find a way to kind of put order to the chaos a little bit. So you're talking about the idea method. How did that come about? Yeah.
Yeah. So when it was, when my youngest was first grade, and I started like really looking at my professional profile, actually I looked at my LinkedIn and I saw my profile and I said, what do I do with this? What do I do with me now? Because for me at the time, it felt like all over the place. Now looking back, it wasn't. There was some cohesiveness, there was some through line, but I felt that it was all over the place. And so I went back to school and I studied coaching. And the reason why I really did that, there were a couple, but one reason was I was consulting for a company, more money than you could ask for a startup. This guy had just sold his company for $500 million. So it wasn't a lack of funding. All the team that he could have, but it was failing. So if you are a startup and you think you're not succeeding because of money, think again. Money can be, having or not having money can be the same problem. But what I could perceive, and as a consultant, I was asked to create a strategy and guide them through the go-to-market strategy, is that I could talk strategy until people were blue in their face. I could not make the leader lead or the people take action. And so I had no tools. And between that and a couple of other things, I decided to go out to school and study coaching because I wanted to understand how we behaved, how I behaved, and how my clients behaved. If you had everything you needed, you had the money, you had the strategy, you had the product, and you had the team, why why is it that you're not succeeding? I mean, there are other variables, but the human variable is a big one. So that's when it all came about, and went back to school, started coaching, launched my coaching career, was great for about 2 years, got bored again. I decided, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do?
I'm sensing a pattern here, Dolores. Yeah.
I know. It's been 7 or 8 years at Masters in Clarity. My husband's getting nervous. But although I did sell one part, so I'm now running another company. So anyway, back then, I launched the coaching business. And really what was happening is that I was taking people through their vision and their aha, like, I want to do this. And then they would go into strategy and ideation, and they would hire a strategist because they saw me as their life coach or executive coach. I'm like, whoa. That's the part that I love to do. And so one of the ways that I did that rebranding is, first of all, I had to discover that. And the way I did that, some people would go and read a book to rediscover themselves or hire a coach. Well, I instead became the leader of the largest TEDx event in the East Coast, because why not? And I ran an event for 1,200 people, 16 speakers in the audience every year. We had one of the current astronauts speak on our stage. We had some huge names speak on our stage. But in that process, I recognized that even people who were like, take this astronaut. She's a scientist, ocean and space scientist, because she studied some surface of the ocean to compare them with the surface of the moon. I never thought about that, but it makes sense.
It sounds like a lot of math.
Yes, but even her, brilliant lady, she was at a loss when I asked her to speak on stage. She's like, well, I have nothing interesting to talk about. And it blew my mind. I said, okay, did all these people that are brilliant, if they can't really translate how they can add value from a stage, we have an issue here, because we regular people, not that smart people, need to hear from them. And so someone has to help them unpack their brilliance so they can elevate us, right? So that's what my clarity journey really began, understanding that that it's not as easy to communicate clearly as I thought it was. And that a lot of people need help in unlocking the message to then unlock the path. Because when you unlock that message that you want to spread through the world, then naturally you will unlock, whether it's a program or a product or a service or a movement that goes along with it. A message is never alone. A message is the beginning of something. So clarifying both the message and the container where that message lives is what I learned, is what I love to do.
I love the idea of clarifying the message, because frankly, that's pretty much how I make my living. But I see that as so core and central to to everything that goes on in the business world. Certainly in my own, whatever I've done, both personally and professionally, and in any job I've had, clarity always comes at the sort of core of it all. And that's kind of where the idea model kind of starts in some ways, is getting that clarity, right? Getting that, what's the idea, but then around that you need to have your message figured out. You say here that most companies struggle with clarifying the core idea of the work that they do and effectively communicating it to the world. And of course, it's because that's what they do. It's because they struggle that I frankly have a job. But thinking of it in a much more integrated way, the model that you've created kind of takes that to, I guess, I'm not going to say another level, but it extrapolates it out to where it applies, I think, where people can apply it, whether you're at a business or whether you're working for yourself or starting your own thing. There's a lot you could do. You even talk about the mistakes that people make, or the mistakes that people in company makes, and that's how that drove you to the method. So anyway, I'd love to dig into the idea method itself. You're talking about TED, it's about TEDx, and how that was getting you there. How about you take us through the idea method a little bit?
So the TEDx experience kind of led me to the the importance of that first thing, right? The clarifying of the message. And it was a few years later, again, I was lucky that with my husband, we built a great home. And I was lucky to be able to practice my curiosity and explore because I was second income, right? And in 2016, that changed all of a sudden. So I woke up January 2017 knowing that I had to grow my business, that I no longer was a full-time mom with a part-time gig. Now I had a part-time job with a part-time mom gig, right? I didn't get rid of my children. I still didn't get rid of my children. I still didn't sell them.
As much as we sometimes would like to, you know.
Yes. But that January of 2017, my brain was about to explode because I had this pressure of performing, financially performing, having my business literally double in sales in 30 days so that we didn't have to remortgage the house. Like we could have done a lot of things, but I said, if I can make it with my business, then we can stay in the life and lifestyle that we have, right? And so for me, it was all a mess in my head and it felt overwhelming. It felt I wasn't sure where to start. What part of my business do I need to focus right now if I want to double? And it was one of those days that I'm in trying to literally banging my head against the wall that I grabbed a simple piece of paper and I said, okay, wait. And that's my strength. I said, when everything comes to it, I break it down and figure it out. I break down the elephant into parts. And so I grab a piece of paper and I said, okay, what are the elements here that are at play? What are the layers? I call them layers of clarity that I need to focus on, like that make the whole of my business. And so, of course, I started with a message because that was obvious. Like, am I communicating my value proposition properly to the market? And then I continue. It's like, okay, am I unique in what I do? And how am I unique? And that brought us to the second layer of clarity, which is the proprietary system. Like, what about my recipe is different, right? And whether you're a baker or you're a strategist or you are a software developer, there's a recipe that is your proprietary system. And that when you are clear on that proprietary system, you can replicate it without compromising quality. That's a non-negotiable element for scaling. The next level of clarity is business model. How am I going to make money? Of all the ways, of all the revenue sources I can create in my business, how do they all fit together? Because if you have a horizontal strategy of revenue sources, meaning I'll sell this, I'll sell that, and hopefully all together I'll make the money I need to do, that's fine if you're in an emergency. But to grow a business, you want to make sure that every single revenue channel that you create feeds or is aligned in some way or another to the rest of your company so that you can start envisioning a customer journey, right? And so that was the third part, the third clarity layer. Then the next clarity layer is obvious. It's okay, now that I know my business model and how it all fits with each other, let's further define what goes into each one of those revenue channels. What does the product or service, or how do I package these? What does that actually look like? Just down to the detail. So kind of those four clarity layers are non-negotiable before you sit down to look at your market. Like, unless you do that, those first four, and I must, for those that, they can't see the book right now, there's the way that it's designed, the idea method is there's 5 clarity layers and then 4 underneath that are at play all the time. So of course, when you're clarifying your message, you need to be aware of your market so that the market clarity is always at play. Like it's not a last minute thought. It might be integrated into every one of the processes of those first layers of clarity. And so once you get those first 4, the message, the provider system, business model, and packages, now you're ready to market. And that layer, which people would call it sales and marketing, I call it trust funnels. And yes, it's one bag where I put marketing and sales and communications in it. There's a lot of conversations about our sales and marketing two different departments? They can be, they don't have to be. All I'm going to say is that if there are two different departments, they better be next to each other. There better be a door or a Slack channel in between. Because if you don't know what the salespeople are saying or doing, if the salespeople don't know what the marketing team is communicating and vice versa, then you're going to have a problem. A continuity problem, you would think, if it were a movie, right?
What's HubSpot called? HubSpot calls that smarketing, sales and marketing.
It's marketing. Yeah,
it's marketing.
It's marketing.
Yep.
Yeah. So I call it trust funnel.
One entity. Yeah. So the trust funnel.
Yeah.
I know there's more steps after trust funnel. We'll get to those, but I wanted to stop here and look at the trust funnel a little bit because, fascinated by funnels in general. I don't know. It's a thing, but everybody I think who's studied marketing gets the basic, and you can choose whatever 4 letters you want, but essentially I learned AIDA. But yeah, awareness, interest, desire, and action. That's it. Awareness, interest, desire, action. Geez, going back to marketing 101, folks, right? AIDA, awareness, interest, desire, action. Some people call some of this consideration, right? The desire part could be the consideration part of the funnel. But generally speaking, you have these 4 points, and it's all very, what do you want the customer or the target to do? You want them to be aware of you. You want them to be interested. Then you want them to get some deeper level of interest. Then you want to arouse their desire so that they take action. It's really kind of manipulative when you describe it that way. Even if it does describe a journey. So then there's this thing that I came across that sort of changed my whole outlook. And that was when I discovered Joseph Jaffe, the Flip the Funnel. This is 10 or so odd years ago. And Joseph, by the way, as a disclaimer, he's a friend, and I think he's just a genius. And he's written quite a few of these great books that were ahead of their time, but Flip the Funnel is one of them. And he added a second funnel coming, so you can imagine you have your funnel coming in one direction, knock it on its side. So you have your attention, your interest, desire, your action. Then that leads to the transaction, to the sale, right? That's the whole acquisition phase. But then you flip it, right? And then there's 4 ways. He divided into 4, but that's his model. But then once you have somebody, you acknowledge that they are your customer, right? Or your consumer, or now you're part of your family, your brand. And then you have to have a dialogue with them, right? You then interact. Then you incentivize them in some way. Hey, you're in the family. Can you help us out a little bit? We'll give you some more free product or whatever it is, in order for them to activate. So you're doing the first funnel is AIDA, then you have ADIA, acknowledge, dialogue, incentivize, and activate. And it's that second funnel that speaks a lot more to the trust, I think, that you kind of get at. And I like the way that it sort of layers on. Since this has come out, I think that core funnel, that first 4 phases, what some people call it 5, that hasn't changed much. People still kind of use that as their guide. McKinsey says it's more of a corkscrew or a spiral, or it's like whatever kind of strain. People go on their own paths now. Funnels might not even be relevant anymore. But that second part, where once somebody's in your ecosystem, how can you nurture them? How can you treat them? It's very useful to think of that model. Now, your trust funnel, I think, wraps that up pretty nicely. So I was thinking about that as I read your book, and that's why I wanted to kind of bring it up and see, if you knew anything about the Flip the Funnel. But even if not, then can you talk a little bit more about the trust funnel and what the stages are and how that is all so interesting to everybody?
Yeah, and I've heard about the Flip the Funnels, and actually I play with that. I do flip the funnel. I merge. So here's let me back out of that. I think we as a company go in journeys with our market, or me as a business owner go in a journey with my client. You can, a journey of 1, journey of millions, doesn't matter. And so I think there's a first kind of funnel, which I call it the trust funnel, which is I name it not so much from the experience of the client, but from the action of the entrepreneur and the business owner. Why do I do that? Because it's much easier for my clients, who, by the way, many of my clients are experts in what they do. They need to know the basics of marketing so that they can make informed decisions, hire vendors and contractors smartly, and wrap their head around, the philosophy of what they do, so that they don't find themselves taking an action advised by someone that doesn't align with them. So in my world, I do not want to be a marketing guru. But what I know I am is a marketing simplest, if that's even a word. I mean, I'm English as a second language. And I think that is actually my gift, because I don't understand half of the words you say. No, I'm kidding. I do. But but when you think about it, when you speak a second language, you're more efficient in how you communicate. I've been here for a long time, so I don't think my brain works any harder anymore. But when you first are living a life in a second language, your brain works harder to make sense of the world. Not just understand the words, it's just the first step, but you have to comprehend concepts. And so half of it is, I think I'm wired that way. I've done many personality tests. And the other half, I'm an English as a second language. So I look at the world consistently in everything that I do, and I say, okay, how can I make this simpler, more straightforward, and faster? And so that's what I do. That's really my value add. And when I look at when I came up with the trust funnel, is mostly as a very clear framework to teach my clients and the people that follow me, is like, what do I do with all the information that's out there that is telling me to open a social media profile, to do Facebook ads, have a website, write a book, get on a podcast, like all this stuff that we're bombarded that we should be doing. What I really did with the trust funnel is that I organized all these strategies, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and make them make sense. So I break my funnel into 4 clear phases. Number 1 is simple, and I always use the analogy of dating. Number 1 is very simple. It's attraction. Right now, you can even do that online, Tinder. Like if you do Tinder, you really want to attract someone, would you put a good photo of you or a bad one? You put a good one. Would you put a good description of who you are or a fuzzy one? So if you're going to do that on Tinder, please do it on LinkedIn too, right? Is that the attraction phase is, where can I show up? Ideally, you want to be omnipresent in the spaces where your market, your people hang out, and start showing up in a consistent and cohesive way. That's the purpose of good branding. Good branding is not just a pretty logo. Good branding is whether it's company branding, personal branding, or like personal life branding, is a concept of understanding who you are, what are your values, what do you stand for, and how you show up, and being consistent in that clarity. That's just what branding is. And so the attraction level is, where do you want to show up consistently? And that's the word. I don't care. Even if you show in one place, as long as you do it consistently, you're going to be fine. Where do you want to show up consistently so people can know that you exist? That's the first layer. Simple. You can even say casting the net, and analogy of fishing. And exactly, it's the same thing. It's just awareness is from the shoes of the market. The market becomes aware of you. Attraction is from the shoes of the business owner. How are you attracting? And content is the best tool right now. Like good value-added content is a way to do it. So once you attract, then you have to give these people an opportunity to come into your world. So if you have a sign outside of your house attracting people, then you invite them into your home and you give them a lemonade, right? A glass of lemonade. So same thing. Then, and again, what we started talking about today is technology is a tool to enable these strategies. It doesn't replace the strategies, it enables. So there's so many ways to capture that attention. There's lead capture pages, there's text automation, there's whatever you name it, you have it. But then you capture the attention so that you can create a space, a container. It could be a mailing list, it could be a Facebook group, it could be a LinkedIn group, it could be a, I don't know, Slack channel. It doesn't matter. But a container where the people that are following you can hang out with you. I call it the gate. When you fly, it's the gate. People are not in your plane yet. They're not flying with you yet, but they're the gate. They're mulling around. And so a gate needs to have nice comfy chairs and places to plug your phone. Like, you have to make it comfortable. You have to give them a reason to stay there and be happy staying there. And so that's where I call the nurturing phase, where you hang out. And here's the thing, from attraction, first date, to nurturing, which is dating, it might be 2 years, it might be 5 years, it might be 1 day. I've had clients who met me and bought from me within 24 hours. I have clients who followed me and stayed on my list for 2 to 3 years. I remember a client last summer, she sends me a message, I would like to have a consultation. I hop on a call, I didn't know her. And I said, well, this is the program. She's like, can I just give you my credit card? I said, well, I haven't told you how much it costs. No, I've been following you for 3 years. And I knew I would work with you. Today is the day I'm start working with you. So whatever, you just go. And that's the power. That's the power of proper nurturing, is that she knew she wanted to work with me. She just wasn't ready, her circumstances or her needs. And so that nurturing, again, it can take a minute, it can take years. And the key word there, what is? Again,
Consistency.
And
also something that, we talked about earlier, this is where so many people really drop the ball, right? Is this phase where they're in such a rush. People can attract. People can try to grab your attention on whether we can even keep picking on LinkedIn is fine. But, you can get into this kind of, hey, okay, you got my attention with LinkedIn, however way you did that. But then they blow it on the nurturing. And oftentimes they blow it right away. It's not, I've found that people who are consistently communicating with me, even if it's once a year, even if it's twice a year, it doesn't matter. As long as they're consistently communicating with me and genuinely paying attention, right? Then I'm like, yeah, I want to help you, or I want to buy from you, or whatever it is. But it's the ones that come in and say, okay, 3 days have passed. Now I'm going to send that second email. And then I'm going to send that second and third message. And then finally, the fourth message, somebody will say, I see that you're not interested in what I have to say. I'm like, now I'm not.
Goodbye.
Right? I mean, it's so they blow it on the nurturing stage. So I think that's I think it's very important to point that out to people.
So that nurturing is key, and there's so many ways to do it. Obviously, email, whatever consistency, frequency you want, social media engagement, dates. What's a date? Is once a month open office hours. Come chat with me. I'll just have my coffee. I'll have a Zoom open. Come in. Like, you don't have to overthink it. It doesn't have to have a big production. Open your Zoom. This is what I did the first 3 years of my business. Pretty much every Friday at 2 p.m., I would send to my email list. I said, my Zoom is open from 2 to 3 every Friday. I was at my desk anyway. I would have a cup of tea. If someone showed up, I would chat, and sometimes they became my clients. Some days nobody showed up, but I was not putting a lot of energy around one day that will make my business explode. It was every Friday at 2 p.m. And by 3 p.m., I closed my day and go on my weekend. And if nobody showed up, then maybe I finished my shopping list. I don't care.
That sounds totally like the Clubhouse approach a lot of people are doing. Exactly that. Hey, we're going to be on Clubhouse from 2 to 3 p.m. on this Friday. But it's a good approach, I think, to just build a community. Yeah.
It's simple, consistent, and if people show up, you serve them. And so once we get to that, then you start in the conversation of conversion or convert, right? Inviting people to take the next step. They've trusted you enough to come into your community. They've trust what you put out there enough to stay in your community because they can get out. And so then you have to start inviting them into working with you, into a non-threatening way of working with you. And, we've all made the mistakes of having one product that costs $15,000 a year. And that's the only thing I have to offer. That was years ago. And now there's always opportunities to work with me. Like I did a workshop last week, which I do for my existing year-long clients. And what I do, and nobody really knows about it, I'm going to start promoting it because it really is a good workshop. I invite anybody to join for $97. It's a very expensive 4 hours that you get a lot done, but I charge $97. Why? Because it's a great first date for someone. It doesn't cost me more money now that especially we're virtual. I used to charge more when it was in person. Now that it's virtual, it doesn't cost me more money. The more people I get, the richer the conversation, the more I have to have breakout rooms anyway because there's a few people joining anyway. So it's a great non-threatening investment to get work done. And so, even if you have a high ticket item, you can have some options on low ticket items that you don't even have to think about investing that money. And it's a great way for them to see you in action and really verify their hunch. If their gut is telling them you're the real thing, that you can really add value, $97 will confirm that. And many times I'll even credit it if they join one of our programs. So it's about that next business model pyramid, starting from a small non-threatening opportunity and then inviting them to go deeper with you. It's just what you were just saying about Joseph is that once they are in your community, they say yes to something, whether it's free or low pay, is that, okay, now how can we go into a deeper relationship in a pull, the push-pull marketing strategies, in a pull way where the client is asking for more versus you pushing for them to take more. And so and then my fourth one is retention. And retention is the same Joseph upside down pyramid, but also is making your clients your best sales team by becoming positive word of mouth. I mean, a lot of people also drop this ball. They're great sales and attraction, and they may even be great at converting, and then they drop it in the fulfillment. You have to wow the client. Stu McLaren says, the cycle of awesomeness ends like you start in the attraction and the conversion, but if you don't blow them away in the engagement, in the fulfillment, then you're shooting yourself in the foot because you'll never refeed that funnel. Because if you don't have word of mouth coming out of that, then you have...
Especially now. I mean, if people didn't know this lesson even 20 years ago, when digital interaction and when social media started to pop up, they certainly better know it now where, if you're not delighting the customer or even letting them run the show, so to speak, the customer's the boss. The customer will decide how and in which manner they're going to buy. And they need to have the one that's most comfortable to them. And if you're not providing that, then you lose them. And then once you've got them, you don't have them. There's no loyalty really anymore. I mean, in certain circumstances, for sure, it depends on there are different kinds of products. But let's just say, let's in a general way, loyalty is a thing of the past because you can lose somebody at any moment, and they know that there's alternatives. So that's why, that doesn't mean that there's no loyalty. It means you can't take it for granted. You have to, and a great product is not going to keep them. You have to actively engage and keep them as part of your community, but in a genuine way and in a way that is, builds the trust. So that's why, with the trust, I love that about the trust funnel. It just makes me think that by the time they're through the process and by the time you've brought them through, pulled them rather than pushed them, in an inviting way where they make the choice at every stage of the journey. By the time they're down there, they have built a certain amount of trust with you, which is a funny word because I don't think it really played such a huge role in the marketing world until, fairly recent times, brands building trust. Yeah.
Well, because we jumped very quickly from the 90s where there was one word conversation anyway. You hope that they trust me because they bought me once, and that was the end of it, right? And then when we went into the digital tools, that mindset didn't change. They basically did whatever they were doing in the 90s with paper, they were doing it with, online. I remember I actually pitched the first website to McDonald's worldwide.
Wow.
In 1996. And they're like, okay, so we just put a flyer online. And I'm like, no, that's not what it's for. It's a little bit more interactive. You can put the nutritional value of your meals. Why would we do that? Nobody will buy it, he said.
Well,
there's my point. That's a whole other conversation. But we didn't really, we adapted how we marketed. We didn't adapt, our strategy or our thinking or intention or philosophy of marketing when technology came about. And so it's been in the last 10 years when we started really exploring the concept of digital marketing, and now a more authentic or human-focused digital marketing that's coming about. I think COVID has helped a lot to deconstruct that facade. And so now we're talking about a new era of disrupting the concepts of marketing from how many products can I force down someone's throat to marketing as a service, marketing as how can I educate, add value, contribute to my ideal client's life before they spend a penny.
There's a whole school of storytelling around that. Storytelling is something I talk about a lot, but if you're a communicator or if you're a content marketer, you need to understand the story cycle. You need to understand how to tell a proper story, not just about yourself, about your brand and about your company, but how to put your customer in the story. And just, it's kind of goes along with what you just said. The brand or you need to position yourself through your story as the guide and the helper, the one that's going to help that person to achieve whatever they want to achieve or get the solution they want to get. You have to be there to help. And that's a big change from long time ago.
And so they trust you.
Yeah. And it's all about trust and building that trust. And was it Mark Schaefer says, the most human marketer wins, I think is what he says. It's like, it's completely, it almost astounds me that it took so long. And even still, some brands don't get it, with the trust situation. And I wanted to, before we, we've been talking, I can't believe we've already been talking for so long, but there's a couple more things because I interrupted the idea method to focus in on the trust funnel because I love it. But there was a couple of items left in the idea method. And I think we talked about, the communication and your proprietary system, the business model. We talked about, your vision, I guess, and the trust funnel. What else do we have left? We've got a few. So I think there's 3 or 4 left. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we talked about the first 5, we talked about the market, and then there's 3 more that are always at play. Number 1 is mindset, whether it's your mindset as a solopreneur or your mindset / culture as an organization is whatever you believe in your head, just wait, it will happen. And so if you believe that you're great and you believe that you can and you believe, what was it Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you'll be right either way. And so managing that conversation in our head is critical to growing our business.
For bigger companies, I've been thinking about, for the experiences that I've had, that is totally all about employee engagement, isn't it? Or employee activation, like getting your workforce to really align with your purpose or vice versa, like making sure that the mindset is there.
And that's what you need. They need people like you to be able to get clear on their values and their purpose and have someone internally to communicate it, right? Otherwise, we can align behind a common goal. And then the other two that are there is vision, and that vision is not a outward facing vision statement. It's more you as a human being, the leader of that organization. What is your vision, personal and professional? What is your ultimate goal with this? And then the last one, but I think it is the last one, and it's usually the last one we think about, but it's the first one when we talk about continuity and scalability, which is systems. If we don't have systems, it's like you run a kitchen without a recipe book. You go out I'm the mom, I have 4 kids and a husband. If I didn't have a recipe book in my kitchen, I would never be able to go out with my girlfriends for dinner because I wouldn't know how to cook, right? So simple metaphor, but basically the systems is your recipe book for your company that allows you to hire, allows you to delegate, and ultimately allows you to have a clean exit strategy.
And it makes sense that would be the kind of like almost capstone to the whole model, because it's often, the thing that we can always improve and add on sort of as we go, right? So so just to recap here, we've got the idea as the center. You've got the proprietary system, right? You've got your business model. You got your service, product, your packaging, the way that everything that you represent yourself in the marketplace, all encompassed in the trust funnel and resting on top of the market understanding, your mindset, systems, and your vision. This is an incredible model. And I think, just like you say in the book and in your writings, it's something that I think most folks who are out there doing their business, and as long as you get your idea and you're solid about your idea, getting to that point, very helpful in moving forward. There's so many more things I want to talk to you about, Dolores, and we're going to have to, I think, have a part 2 at some point, because there's so much here to unpack. And even, we were talking, I really wanted to get into marketing as a river. We're going to put a pin in that. Why is marketing a river? Listeners, think about that. If anybody has an idea of why marketing is a river, send me a note, put a comment in here, let us know. But look, in the meantime, you can find Dolores on LinkedIn. Look up her name, Dolores Hirschmann, and it'll be spelled properly in the episode title. Where else can people find you, Dolores?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is mastersinclarity.com. You can even go to mastersinclarity.com/free and download a lot of our free resources.
There you go, mastersinclarity.com/free. And are you on Twitter and
I am. So, I'm on Twitter, but I don't know. Twitter kind of like, yeah. But I'm Instagram at Masters in Clarity, Facebook at Masters in Clarity.
Fantastic. Well, Dolores, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for walking us through the system and, for just making my day that much better by hanging out with me for an hour. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dan, for having me.
You got it. If you enjoyed this episode of The Dan Nessel Show, please head on over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the podcast player of your choice to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And please don't forget to spread the word. Thanks for listening.